Hello, my name is John McAvoy and I work for the Federal Records Center program of the National Archives and Records Administration. This module will teach you how to create a new reference request step by step, and I will explain each of the data entry fields. Let's start a new request. To create a new reference request, navigate to the Reference Request tab at the top of your screen, and then click the Create action, and this will bring up all the reference requests that you yourself created using your own user ID, displayed in either My Workspace or FRC Workspace. Next step is to click the button entitled Create Reference Request. Now here, not as many fields for you to fill out, but many things that you need to consider. First thing that you need to notice is that this automatically gives you a reference request number right from the start. In addition to that, from a data entry perspective, again, like in records transfers, you should start at the top of the leftmost column and work your way down, go to the top of the next column and work your way down, again, left to right. So the first thing that you need to select is the record group from which you need to place your reference request. And if you're given multiple record groups, you need to select the appropriate record group for your records transfer. The system automatically shows you your agency name. It shows your last name as the creator with your first name. And then we get into some decisions that you need to make. And this is nature of service, okay? Typically, a customer will select temporary loan of records. And a temporary loan of records means you're going to retrieve this file or box back from the Record Center. You're going to do with it what you need to do, and then you're going to send it back to the Record Center, and the Record Center will refile it in the exact same position from whence it was retrieved. That's what temporary loan of records is. The next nature of service that you might choose is permanent withdrawal. Permanent withdrawal means that you're retrieving something from the Record Center and you have absolutely no intention of ever sending it back for refiling. Now, permanent withdrawal is typically used for entire container retrievals, but you can also use it for file level retrievals as well. Next nature of service to talk about is copy of records. This is a premium service. There are additional fees for us to make copies of your file. This is where we will go into the file and retrieve, based on your instructions in the comments field, perhaps pages 2 and 3. And we will destaple the file, we'll take it to a copy machine, make copies of those 2 pages, reassemble the file in the exact condition that it was in when we retrieved it, and refile that file into the box. And then we will send you, based on your shipping method that you choose, we will send you the copies that you selected. The nice feature about this is that your file never leaves the Record Center. And that's one advantage of using the copy records scenario. Similarly, we have a service entitled Smart Scan. And Smart Scan is where, instead of making a copy, we're going to scan and email you the specific pages that you request within a file. One suggestion that I make, if you're selecting Smart Scan, it's good practice not to make sure that whatever it is you want us to email to you does not contain personally identifiable information. If the file contains that kind of information, you should probably retrieve it on a temporary basis instead. Okay? Again, Smart Scan is a premium fee service. Next up is on-site review. On-site review can be used if, for example, you have some records transfers at the Record Center and you're not quite sure what's in them. Instead of paying for the shipping charges to ship all the boxes back to your office, what you could do is make arrangements to go out to the Record Center and use one of their conference rooms and examine your box or boxes in a records transfer to make determinations, perhaps create a new box listing for those records transfers. And that way you'll save yourself some shipping charges. And then the last nature of service is other. Other isn't typically used by our customers, but it can be used, for example, if you wanted the Record Center to just go into box 7, for example, of a particular records transfer and determine if file XYZ123 is in that box and to call you back with an answer to that question. That's what the other feature might be used for. We'll continue on with temporary loan of records. And then you have two service levels to choose from. You have standard and emergency. Well, with standard, by virtue of your interagency agreement with the Federal Record Center program, we have 1 business day to retrieve the item that you're requesting and get it into the hands of the vendor that will ultimately deliver it to you. Once we get it into the hands of the vendor that will ultimately deliver it to you, it's out of our control as to the speed at which it will arrive, okay? So that's what standard service level is. Now, the emergency service level is where you need us to make our best attempt to get it into the hands of the vendor who's going to deliver it to you on the same day. But you need to apply some common sense here, because there is a premium fee that's associated with an emergency service level. But you have to think of the time of day as well. If you place an emergency reference request up till, say, about noon of any given day, most likely your reference request will get retrieved and into the hands of the vendor who's going to deliver it to you. But keep in mind that most record centers are using FedEx or UPS to deliver these things to you, and those trucks usually show up between 2 and 4 o'clock on a regularly scheduled pickup basis every day. So now if you're in the early hours of the afternoon and you still need us to get it into the hands of this vendor, my strong suggestion to you is to go ahead and select emergency, make note of the reference request number that you see up at the top here, and contact the Record Center and speak to the reference department supervisor. Give them this reference request number and say, I'd really appreciate if you could get it into the hands and get it of the vendor who's going to ship it to me today, okay? Now, of course, if it's after 5, 6 o'clock, there's no chance that it will get into the hands of the vendor because the Record Center employees have all gone home for the day as well. Now, of note, and I'm sure you'll all be wildly excited about this, you can access the ARCIS customer portal from home. So if you suddenly get home at 8 o'clock on a Friday night and say, oops, I should have ordered that file, again, and you order it on an emergency basis for home, it's not going to be shipped to you and it'll be made available to you or delivered on Monday morning. So if you're selecting emergency, apply a little common sense as well. Next up, you always have to choose your request category, again, depending on the templates that have been made available to you in your personal profile. You may see only the general reference template, or you may see some of the other agency-specific templates. For this example, we're going to select the general reference template and the formal change. And now we have a records transfer box, a container number box, and a case file information box. But we have to take a little side journey here and discuss what's behind this little blue and white question mark. And what we're talking about here are legacy transfer numbers versus ARCIS-born transfer numbers. Now, the important thing to remember in all of this is fiscal year 2009, FY09. That is the year that we deployed ARCIS incrementally across all the record centers during a fiscal year. Now, in our old system, NARS 5, we were able to create duplicate transfer numbers. So you could have the same transfer number at each of our 16 individual record centers. But as we discovered when we were migrating to the new Siebel platform, all record transfer numbers had to be a unique entity in and of themselves. The reason for that is we attach all of your reference request, interfile, refile, disposition transactions to this small universe known as the records transfer number. So we had to make all of these duplicate records transfer numbers unique within the system. And here's how we did it. We took a former accession number, as it was known, for example, 021-04-0001, and what we did is we tacked on at the beginning of that transfer number an FRC facility code, and those codes you can see down at the bottom of this particular finding aid, followed by the transfer number as you used to know it, and then we used to have a field in NARS 5 known as the subgroup field, and if that field was populated, we tack that information on to the end of your records transfer number, And that's what made 99.9% of all records transfers coming from the old NARS 5 system unique when they were migrated into the ARCIS platform. Now, conversely, we have ARCIS-born transfer numbers. Those transfer numbers begin with PT, which stands for nothing more than physical transfer, followed by the record group number, followed by now a 4-digit fiscal year number, followed by your 4-digit transfer sequence number. And you have to keep in mind, again, we deployed incrementally throughout fiscal year 09. So for example, our Washington National Record Center, or Suitland as the example here, they deployed in June, July of FY09. So at the beginning of the fiscal year, they were creating transfers in the old system. And about 2 weeks before their deployment, we took a snapshot of that inventory, and we changed all of those existing transfer numbers into these legacy transfer numbers that all begin with, for example, with Suitland, a W, okay? Now we deployed ARCIS in June, July of 2009. Now, Suitland started to create ARCIS-born records transfer numbers. So my point here is this. In FY08 and prior, all of your records transfer numbers are going to be legacy transfer numbers. In FY09, some of them might be legacy transfer numbers, and some of them might be ARCIS-born transfer numbers. But in FY10, up till now, all of them will be ARCIS-born transfer numbers. So that's a little bit about the difference between legacy transfer numbers and ARCIS-born transfer numbers when you're going to place a reference request. All right. Now, to choose a records transfer number, if you know the records transfer number exactly as ARCIS knows the transfer number, feel free to type it in. However, if you're not quite sure, you can use some query functionality. And here is a list displaying all of the records transfers that align with all of your access control features in your personal profile. So if there's a transfer number as part of your agency, and perhaps it's a classified transfer and you don't have classified access in the customer portal, that transfer will not be displayed in this particular list, okay? So you can use the query functionality up here. For example, as we learned earlier, you can look for something that ends in 0048. You can also toggle what it is you want to find by transfer number, transfer status. Your customer reference number field here might be of great importance to you. Security classifications, security level, etc. Whatever it is you need to do to find the transfer number that you're looking for, you can look for it within this box. Now what I'm going to do is toggle a couple of pages, and I'm just going to pick a random transfer here, and I'm going to highlight it by clicking the little caret to the left, and next I'm going to click OK. And now that transfer number is populated. Now next up, if you know your container number, meaning container 1, 2, 3, etc., go ahead and populate it in the container number field. But my suggestion to you is that you always use the selection feature, and here's why. You will notice that each container number also has an asset number, and each asset number is a unique license plate number for a particular box. It's nothing that you really have to worry about, but it's the way that we are now able to link a particular container to an individual location on a shelf within the record center. But the important thing to note here is it shows you the status of that particular box. And the reason I like for you to pick your containers from this selection feature is that if you see a status that says temporarily withdrawn or permanently withdrawn, you might as well stop the creation of this particular reference request, because we can't ship to you what we don't have. And you will simply get an error message if you proceed with this particular reference request that says this item is not available for reference because it is previously charged out or temporarily withdrawn to an individual. So we'll select box 1 here. Now next up, I have a favor to ask of all of you. If you are requesting a file, only type in file information in this box. If you are requesting a whole container, put a check mark in the whole container box and leave the case file information blank. Notice what happens when I click on another field here and I have a whole container selected. Okay? Notice how case file information blanked out. The reason for this, that I ask you to do this, is because you can trick the system where you could put in a file name in here and check the whole container box, and what it will do is it will send a message to the record center that you're requesting an individual file, but that you also want the whole container. And the poor archives aide out at the Federal Record Center isn't going to know what to do. This is a quirk in the system that we are working on resolving at this point. So again, if it's just a file that you're requesting, place file information in here. If it's a whole container, only put a check mark in that box. We'll revert this to a file request. Okay? Down here is some other information about your security classification, your charge account, and where this particular records transfer is stored. Keep in mind this does show you where this box is stored, so if you've selected on-site review and you're in Washington, D.C., but this records transfer is stored at our Seattle facility, you have a very long drive ahead of you. So keep that in mind. All right. In the next column, we have information about the recipient. Now, you can change this. You can change the name of the recipient if you need to. It automatically defaults to you as the creator and also your primary address within your personal profile. But if you need to select another address, simply click on the selection feature here, and here are all the other addresses that I have available to me in my personal profile. And I can then pick, maybe this one needs to go down the road to a different address at our other office building, and I could pick another name if I so chose. Now down here we have phone number and fax number information. Had I had those fields populated in my personal profile, those numbers would have automatically shown up here, as does my email address. Now, with the email address, if you've selected Smart Scan, and you're going to have this emailed to a person other than you, all you have to do is clear the email address and type in the recipient's email address. And now our last column, of course it's showing you our status is reference initiated. That means you're working on this particular reference request. But then we have a host of different shipping methods that we have to talk about here. And the first one is standard build. And what standard build means, depending on the size and weight of the package that we're going to deliver to you or have delivered to you, we will bill you one of our flat rate shipping charges via your interagency agreement with the Federal Record Center program. That's what standard build is. However, we also have standard prepaid. And what standard prepaid is for is that you can tell us what your shipping vendor account number is. And this is on ground services. And you'll notice that when I selected standard prepaid, this allows you to select a ground service carrier. We'll pick UPS Ground, for example. But then you must provide your shipping number. So instead of us billing you our rates, our flat rates, via the interagency agreement, now the shipping charge will be billed to your own UPS or FedEx account. Similarly, if you need expedited overnight service, okay, as opposed to the 3 or 4 days that a ground service would choose, you select expedited, and now you'll notice that the different services available at a particular record center are visible here. FedEx Priority, FedEx Standard, etc. Various UPS services are available. You need to pick the one that you want, and yet again, supply your particular account number for the vendor that you selected, and we will do a third-party billing to that particular vendor on your account. Okay? Here we have customer pickup as an available option. That's where you can drive to the record center, provided that record center is in fairly close proximity to your office, and go and pick up the records yourself at their loading dock. You could select, for example, fax to be used with copy of records, if you wanted to have your pages of a file faxed to you. In certain markets, we have Metro Courier Service. Typically that's set up with or via a local agreement with your Federal Record Center, where it's a NARA employee with a van that can deliver your reference request materials back to you, either on a standard basis or on a rush basis. And then, of course, we have on-site review, which is to be used in conjunction with nature of service on-site review. And lastly, Smart Scan to be used in conjunction with nature of service Smart Scan. So we'll leave this one at standard build. And that concludes filling out the top part of the form. You can scroll down to the bottom. Any comments that you want to notify the Record Center about, you can type in here. It's a very, very large field. However, I would recommend that if you're adding a comment in there that is of utmost importance to you and that it's communicated to the Record Center, please remember that Record Centers deal with thousands of individual reference requests a day. Your best bet, once again, is to jot down the reference request number, contact the Record Center, and talk to the reference supervisor to make sure that your comments are communicated clearly to that Record Center so they fulfill your request properly. Next up are your options, either save and finish later, or to go back, or to continue. I'll select continue. This is now my chance to double check my data entry into the form. I can then edit, save and finish later, cancel request altogether, or submit to FRC. And here we get the balloons and confetti message that says my reference request has been submitted successfully and will be processed by the FRC. Now if I navigate back to reference requests that I created, you will see that reference request up here at the very top of the list. And if I drill down on it, I can see all the information about my reference request. Now of note, typically, like I said, we have one business day to get these reference requests into the hands of the vendor, so your list on My Workspace should be fairly short-lived. The Record Center should pick up on your reference request within a few hours, after which they will mark it as reference processing status, and it will vanish from My Workspace and will then start showing up in FRC Workspace instead, okay? So keep in mind that depending on the status of your reference request, depends on whether it'll show up in My Workspace or FRC Workspace. And that concludes our module on how to create an individual reference request. As always, help is available for the ARCIS Customer Portal. You can access a wealth of information at the ARCIS website, as well as access to all of the training manuals for all of the available components of ARCIS. Link to that via www.archives.gov/FRC/ARCIS. There too you will find a link for the ARCIS Help Desk entitled Get Help, and that will provide you with information about the hours of operation for the ARCIS Help Desk in St. Louis, as well as their phone number and an email address. And lastly, you can contact your ARCIS administrator.
Hello,